May I just first say that we at Utah Valley State College really enjoy the association that we have with international things, with the Kennedy Center, and especially with Dean Peterson. We try to cooperate together so that we don't reinvent the wheel. Right now we're your little sister. In a few years we're going to be your big brother down there at the rate we're growing. Dr. Kirakossian is a wonderful gentleman, a gentleman's gentleman I call him. He's just a very fine person, and it's been a pleasure to have known him. I met him quite some number of months ago in Washington, D.C. As you know, Armenia is the recipient of a great deal of help from the state of Utah, particularly from humanitarian services of the church as well as the Huntsman family. And yesterday we had the opportunity to spend time with the Huntsmans at the Huntsman corporate headquarters. Dr. Kirakossian, Ambassador Kirakossian, has been in the United States as the ambassador from Armenia for approximately 17 months. Prior to that, he was the ambassador to Greece. But it covered more territory than that, because he also served in that post overseeing affairs for Cyprus, Slovenia, Croatia, Albania, and Yugoslavia, a hotbed of the world, as is his own area, the area of Armenia. Ambassador Kirakossian, prior to that post, was the first Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs for Armenia, and prior to that was the acting Minister of Foreign Affairs. Ambassador Kirakossian has a rich background in history. He has a bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degree in history, and has been involved in the Academy of Sciences in various very senior positions in the Academy of Sciences in Armenia. This is the 1700th anniversary of Christianity in Armenia, and I found out that this is an extremely significant event, the first nation in 301 to embrace Christianity as the formal state religion. And as you know, Armenia was devastated just over a decade ago by an enormous earthquake that I didn't know how bad it was until the ambassador informed me that it devastated 40% of their entire capacities, manufacturing and infrastructure and whatnot. If that were to happen here in the United States, we might as well close down the country. So he represents a country that has both enormous hardships and great joy in this year of celebration. I should just close by saying that the ambassador has a wife and a 10-year-old son, so he knows what it's like to be a husband and father. Let's welcome Ambassador Kirakossian.
Thank you very much, Mr. Butler, for this touching presentation. Thank you. I appreciate the personal efforts, really, of Dr. Butler, Associate Vice President for International Affairs of Utah Valley State College, who facilitated my visit to Utah. I'm delighted to be here today with you at the Brigham Young University and share my views with you on challenges of maintaining the political and economic stability in transition economies, particularly in Armenia. Before I start, let me say that there are many ties between the state of Utah and the Republic of Armenia. There is a small yet vibrant ethnic Armenian community in Utah, including some students in this audience. A prominent resident of the Utah, a fine business and civic leader, John Huntsman, is a major Armenian benefactor and an honorary citizen of Armenia. Since '88, the LDS Church has established a presence in Armenia, thus contributing to a growing diversity there. Finally, we are fortunate to have beautiful nature and mountainous environment, as in Utah. Over the past decade, the world has witnessed truly amazing, indeed earth-shaking developments in politics, economics, and technology. With the end of the Cold War, we no longer face a world dominated by superpower rivalries, nor is the world divided anymore along ideological lines. The emerging spirit of partnership and regional cooperation is forcing a paradigm shift in the historic patterns of power and politics among the nations. Democratic forms of government and the corresponding respect for basic human rights and liberties, so cherished here in the United States, are also much more widespread than just a decade ago. International trade and flows of capital have increased so much so that they have made the economies of the countries of the world interconnected and increasingly interdependent. The domain of foreign relations, paradoxically, is now less well defined, as commercial, environmental, migration, and human rights issues are added to the agenda of bilateral and multilateral relations. Revolutionary changes in information technology have dramatically shortened the time and even the venues in which information is exchanged. As 17th century English diplomat Sir Henry Wotton noted once, "An ambassador is an honest man sent to lie abroad for the good of his country." Well, any diplomat who tries to do exactly that will find that his audience is so well informed about his or her country that it makes the conversation a real challenge. I personally view this growing interconnectedness between the peoples and the nations of the world, as well as the strength of people's diplomacy, as one of the most important achievements of our civilization so far. Another major development of this past decade is the transformation of the former Soviet Union and the Eastern Europe bloc from socialist countries to what is now called transition economies. These countries started economic and democratic reforms in order to modernize their economies, to improve their living standards, and to create governments accountable to and elected by their citizens. These countries also choose to integrate in regional security and economic arrangements, such as NATO, the European Union, the Black Sea Economic Cooperation Forum, etc. The experience of transition economies is adding a new dimension to the traditional view of the problems of development. If you look at this field of knowledge, the post-World War II world was subdivided into three large categories: the capitalist world, the socialist world, and the developing nations. The capitalist world and the socialist world had diametrically opposing views on the ownership of the means of production. The developing nations were typically post-colonial countries who have tried to build an industrial economy and modern infrastructure. Now that the socialist bloc doesn't exist anymore, with a few notable exemptions, the former socialist countries are now labeled transition economies to differentiate from the other developing countries. Overall, the transition economies have a large, educated labor force and a developed infrastructure. The problem is transforming old industries to new realities and embracing those business values so deeply rooted in the West. Naturally, I would like to describe the transition experience of my homeland, Armenia. While some of the challenges were unique to Armenia and the region, its path of democratic and economic development since 1991 is not unlike other countries in Eastern Europe and newly independent states. We have adopted new legislation to promote privatization and foreign investment. We have created new political and economic infrastructures. At the same time, Armenia's track record reflects our difficult geopolitical environment and our external constraints. 10 years ago, Armenia made one of the most fateful decisions in its centuries-long history, choosing out of its own popular will to become a free and independent nation. Armenia achieved independence following the precipitous collapse of the Soviet Union, our people endorsed independence by referendum on September 21st, 1991. The choice of the people of Armenia was to have an independent and democratic country and to embark on the path of economic reforms. This year, we will celebrate the 10th anniversary of the independence. Incidentally, we are going to celebrate another important event this year, the 100th anniversary of Christianity in Armenia. Armenia is the first nation to adopt Christianity as its state religion. These two anniversaries are illustrative of two sides of the Armenian nation, the spiritual and the material, the ancient and the modern. In 1991, Armenia's position and survival was not a given. Indeed, Armenia's northern regions, which were devastated by an earthquake in 1988, coupled with the equally cataclysmic collapse of the Soviet Union, meant for us a loss of traditional markets, access to resources, and geopolitical stability. The 1988 earthquake focused the world's attention to Armenia, and we were fortunate to have received humanitarian assistance from all over the world. It was after the earthquake that a very distinguished son of Utah, John Huntsman, visited Armenia and sent humanitarian assistance to the victims of the natural disaster. Mr. Huntsman holds a very special place in the minds and the hearts of Armenian people, not only because of his intelligence, perseverance and wisdom, but also because of his personal dedication to Armenia's revival. The Huntsman family has given more than 30 million to Armenia to date, and the most recent project was the opening of new school in the district of Gyumri, which is appropriately named the Huntsman Village. Finally, the Huntsman Corporation was the first foreign company to be established in Armenia in 1989, when a roofing tile plant was built in Armenia. In addition to the Huntsman family, the LDS charities have distributed more than 4.2 million in humanitarian aid to Armenia. But back to the topic. In 1991, skeptics questioned the viability of the future of our new Armenian Republic. Yet now Armenia's independence is a reality firmly implanted in the minds and hearts of the Armenian people. I don't want to try to paint a completely rosy picture here. Armenia has experienced more than its share of human hardship, economic crisis and regional instability since regaining its sovereignty. Nevertheless, we have made substantial progress in laying the foundations for a viable state, both economically and politically. At the close of our first decade of independence, Armenia is again at a crossroads. We still have a long way to go to reach the appropriate level of economic prosperity and rule of law. As I see it, Armenia's key mid-term objectives are ensuring a robust and sustainable economic development which can be translated into a rise in the general living standards of our people. Continuing to promote the rule of law and democratic governance as a way to secure full participation of Armenia's citizens in the process of governance and to improve our government's accountability to its electorate. Addressing national security challenges, including first, political resolution of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, the second, improved relations with our neighbors, and the end of economic blockades imposed by Azerbaijan and Turkey, the third, participation in international security arrangements, and fourth, European integration. All these objectives are interconnected. It is not possible to solve one challenge without addressing the others. A dynamic democratic process can be rendered useless if the fruits of economic progress do not improve the people's lives in a significant and irreversible fashion. At the same time, absent a settlement of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict and lifting of the blockades, Armenia's economic progress and trade links will remain stagnant. We see the economic development of Armenia as both an end in itself and a long-term answer to our national security challenges. Economic prosperity will consolidate civic and democratic liberties and strengthen the independence of Armenia and its democratic institutions. It will also tap into the productive resources of the nation, unleashing the entrepreneurial spirit of the Armenian people. Armenia's economic development must be based on a modern, competitive market economy with minimal government intervention. Armenia in itself is a small market. Clearly, its future lies in its economic integration within regional and international markets, together with the promotion of free trade, as Armenia's exports are a way to enlarge its domestic market and strengthen its competitiveness. It is obvious that we need to work harder to attract investors, both foreign and domestic. Armenia will continue its efforts to integrate into the world economy and to join the World Trade Organization. We want to and we will work to promote a business-friendly environment, enforce economic legislation, and, of course, decrease the burden of taxation, a goal I know is shared by taxpayers worldwide. One of Armenia's blessings is the strength of its diaspora. More Armenians live outside the borders of Armenia, some 5 million, than in Armenia itself. In the U.S. alone, there are over 1 million Armenian people of Armenian descent. During the difficult years since the independence, we have benefited from diaspora support and encouragement. They have also been among the first to invest in Armenia's private sector and engage in trade with Armenian companies. Just as there is no alternative to economic reforms in Armenia, there is really no credible alternative to a democratic form of government. Our country possesses an educated and motivated population capable of governing itself. Armenia remains committed to building democratic institutions and civic society and to defending freedom of the press and other civic liberties. It is no easy task to create a healthy society, a strong government, and a real democracy. One of the main impediments to Armenia's integration in regional and international trade arrangements is the twin economic blockade imposed by our neighbors, Azerbaijan and Turkey. Its effects were particularly suffocating to us in the early years of independence, causing a severe energy and transportation crisis and contributing to a drastic decline in the health and living standards of our people. Armenia not only survived but also advanced, so that today the current effect of blockade is to keep fragmented the Caucasus common economic space and to impede needed regional integration and the flow of international capital into the region. We believe that the South Caucasus countries should act together to develop strong regional economic and commercial ties, which is the key to our mutual development. In our view, no country in the region can strike its reach on its own. Such a disparity will simply be unsustainable, and instability in one country will trickle to the whole region. We are convinced that parallel to the settlement of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, the economic blockades will be lifted, thus permitting the establishment of a lasting peace in South Caucasus. We believe that peace can be achieved only if the parties to the conflict demonstrate the political will and readiness to compromise. It is, however, competent mediation that brings us together and helps us establish mutual confidence, engage in a constructive search for common solutions, and shape a shared vision for peace and prosperity. We acknowledge the leading role of the United States in supporting Armenia and its neighbors in achieving a durable peace, coupled with stability and security in southern Caucasus region. Last week, Secretary of State Colin Powell extended an invitation to presidents of Armenia and Azerbaijan to hold peace talks in Key West, Florida. We are hopeful that the negotiations will find a formula that will allow the parties to the conflict address to the key issues of disagreement and transform the current ceasefire into lasting peace. Our answer to the development dilemma in Armenia is to reform our economy, build a democratic society, and live in peace with our neighbors. We are convinced that if we accomplish these goals, we can achieve an honorable place for ourselves in the community of nations. Thank you. And I'm ready for questions, please. Yes.
What would be an acceptable solution to Armenia about the Nagorno-Karabakh problem? What is the position you're going to take to West if it happens?
Okay. So I don't know. You know the history of conflict. Maybe I'll try to tell you very shortly about the history of conflict. At the beginning of 19th century, Armenia was divided between two empires, Persian Empire and Turkish Empire, Ottoman Empire. So the part of today's Armenia and Armenian populated enclave of Nagorno-Karabakh were part of Persia. Then the Russia conquered these territories, and they were part of Russian Empire for a long time. Before the events in Russia in 1917, the revolution, Armenia was divided into eastern part and western part. So after the independence of Azerbaijan and Armenia for 2 years, before the two countries were Sovietized in 1920, the Karabakh, Armenian populated, was a disputed area between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Then when the two republics were Sovietized, so Stalin gave this enclave with Armenian population to the Azerbaijan, because Azerbaijan was rich of oil, and because Stalin's national policy to divide the nations and to rule easily. Such problems like Nagorno-Karabakh you will find in other republics, between the republics of ex-Soviet Union, like you can see Northern Ossetia in Russia and Southern Ossetia in Georgia, the same nation. And Azerbaijan too, Armenian populated, was given to Azerbaijan. After the Gorbachev's policy of perestroika, glasnost, in '88, this population raised the issue for reunification with Armenia, because 70 years they were in part of Soviet Azerbaijan. But then Azerbaijan started war against the enclave to eliminate the population, to solve the conflict by military way. But Armenians defended themselves. And now we have ceasefire since '94. Ceasefire, but de facto this land is Armenian land. The currency is Armenian. The companies are the branches of Armenian companies, etc. So we had three stages in the peaceful settlement. OSCE is dealing with the negotiations. We have Minsk process, and we have co-chairmans. Co-chairmans are United States, France, and Russia. And in the first stage, the proposal of OSCE was to maintain the autonomy, to maintain the territorial integrity of Azerbaijan, and maintain the autonomy for these people, for Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh. But it was not acceptable for Armenians, because 70 years the status of these people was autonomy in Soviet Azerbaijan. That's why this idea was not acceptable for the Armenian side. The second idea was idea of common state. It means we were trying to to keep equality between the international principles of territorial integrity and self-determination of the people. So it means that common state, it is we are keeping the territorial integrity. Nagorno-Karabakh will stay within the Azerbaijan, but it will be sort of independent and semi-independent to the authorities in Baku, with its own government, with its own constitution, with its own police and guards, and with its representations in Baku, in capital of Azerbaijan, in Yerevan, capital of Armenia, and Vienna as the headquarters of OSCE. We accept this idea, we and the people of Nagorno-Karabakh, but Azerbaijan refused to accept this idea. But it was 1.5 and 2 years ago this proposal was raised. Now we have new proposal, but it is a confidential one because we are going to start negotiations in Florida very soon, on April the 3rd. But I think now we are very close to the final settlement. Very close. Maybe we will return back the territories, Azeri territories that we occupied for the security matters, guarantee matters. They will provide the corridor between Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh to provide the linkage between Nagorno-Karabakh and motherland. And also we will provide corridor over the territory of Armenia to the Azeri enclave in Armenia that we have. And we will have more maybe sophisticated status for Nagorno-Karabakh. I can say what it will be, but it would be, I think, acceptable as for Armenia, as for Azerbaijan. So we are expecting this new round of negotiations in Florida. We'll see what will happen. Other questions? I'll tell you, to answer this question, I have to go to the past a little bit, to Soviet period of Armenian history. In Soviet period, Armenia created really very sophisticated for the time and for the Soviet structure industry. It was heavy industry, chemistry, machinery, mining, but it was integrated in the Soviet economy. I mean, after the independence, we've lost all linkages with the Russia, with the other republics, because they were providing Armenia with raw materials, and we were producing the final product for the Soviet market. For example, we were producing more than 80% of the needs of Soviet Union in rubber. Can you imagine? Small Armenia. We had huge plant, a rubber plant, caoutchouc plant. We were receiving raw material from Azerbaijan. We were producing rubber in Armenia, and we were providing it to the Soviet market. Machinery, generators, pumps, electric pumps, etc. We had even more than 60 secret plans for the for the military plants. I mean, we were producing components and elements for the Soviet Army, for planes, for submarines, etc. All the linkages are cut off today, and these plants are no more. They are not working. So people are educated, very educated in Armenia, and that's why we need very quickly. We need new technologies. We need new investments to rebuild our economy on the basis of new technologies and new industries like high-tech, software. And there are already companies that are coming to Armenia. They are very much interested in the level of education, level of motivation of people, and many software companies, and headed by Armenians first, because we are benefited by Armenians who are good businessmen and rich businessmen. They are coming to Armenia and trying to invest their capital in Armenia. The second the first item of our export today is diamonds. We have 4 big diamond cut companies in Armenia. Jewelry, the main item of the export of Armenia today. We are producing the old style machines and generators for the ex-Soviet market, for Central Asian republics, for Russia, but these products are not compatible with Western products. That's why we have to change all the technologies. Agricultural sector, it's a very important sector for Armenia. We have good vegetables, fruits, dry fruits. We have grapes. We have wine production in Armenia, very good red wine. We have famous Armenian brandy that the factory was established at the end of the 19th century in Yerevan, and it was famous in Soviet market and Eastern Bloc market. We sold the company to the French company, and it is very successful today. We started after the independence. We started the process of privatization. In 2 years, we privatized all the agricultural lands in Armenia. Then the second stage of privatization of small and medium enterprises. Now the big enterprises are in the process. So, but we have also difficulties. Difficulties is the landlocked situation, the blockades I mentioned, and also transition period of from the Soviet type of laws and economy to the new type of laws and liberal free market. Yes.
I was curious, you're speaking about the importance of the countries of South Caucasus pulling together to create economics and discuss trading economy. I was wondering how you view the importance of the older resources, the rubber, wine production, versus the new technologies. What role do you see those countries playing in its development in South Caucasus?
First of all, I mentioned about the peace process that we are facing, and also the co-chairmen and the OSCE is looking for the opportunities for the regional cooperation in the region after the settlement of the conflict. So if we will settle the conflict in Karabakh, we will have the open border with Turkey. First of all, it's very important for Armenia to have access to the Black Sea, to have access to the Middle Eastern countries. It is very important also the opening border with Azerbaijan to establish a good relationship with neighboring country and to be benefited from the resources of Caspian Sea, oil and gas. And now before now there were discussions about the pipeline to Georgia, then to Turkey, but the shortest way of pipeline to the Turkish port Ceyhan is via Armenia. So if we will settle the conflict, we will have opportunity to be benefited from the oil routes. We have, despite the situation with Azerbaijan and with Turkey, we have very good relations with our two other neighbors. It's Georgia. We have access via Georgia to the ports of Black Sea, Poti, Batumi, and we have also access to the Persian Gulf via Iran. With Iran, we have a small border, and during these 10 years of the independence of Armenia, we haven't any political problem with this country. We have more than 150,000 Armenians in Iran. They are free. They have their own churches, two members of parliament, Armenians, also open churches, open newspapers, etc. Despite the difference in religion, but we have traditional history, relationship, etc. So there are bases for this cooperation. If we will settle justice conflict, we will have opportunities to use the opportunities to really create this regional cooperation on a regional cooperation basis. Yes. Yes. Okay. The fight against corruption is the main task of the government, but it is not. It's not so easy to fight with corruption. Why? Because in Soviet time, for example, the Armenia's budget was in good years $3 billion. With $3 billion budget, we were able to keep the industry. We were able to keep 3.5 million people in Armenia. But our budget today is $500 million because we've lost labor people. We've lost all these plants, huge plants, and infrastructure of the Soviet period. That's why we have very low state salaries in Armenia today, because of our budget, because the economy is not working. So that's why it's very difficult to fight against corruption. To fight against corruption, it means to create, first of all, healthy economy, to create healthy laws and rule of law. So really, we are doing everything with the help of the World Bank and the international community to create new laws to establish rule of law in Armenia, but in very, very difficult conditions. When we are speaking about corruption, when the policeman's salary is $30 per month, it is very difficult to fight against this. You can just it is very difficult for the state state salaries to raise the state salaries, but we have more private sector, and we are basing on this. We are going to privatize all all the infrastructure that we had, even the airlines, even the roads, everything in Armenia, except the government. So that's why we are trying to base it just on private sector, to have healthy private sector. If we will have tax-paying healthy private sector, we will have more budget to keep the state salaries high. Thank you. Yes. State of healthcare. Yes. Okay. Okay. There are enough doctors in Armenia because we had very developed in terms of Soviet Union educational system in Armenia. We have special medical university in Armenia and colleges, medical colleges, which are providing the very high education for people. But the problem is this changing of the structure, because in Soviet time everything was very cheap. And you were not paying for the health care in Soviet period. And now it's very difficult for the state to keep all these services because the state is in very bad conditions. That's why we were trying this sort of step-by-step privatization of small medical institutions, hospitals, and now we have a system when the healthy people or rich people must to pay for the services they are getting in these institutions, but the ordinary people that have problems with the poor people are getting today again they are not paying for the services of medical institutions. We have support from the diaspora is coming to Armenia. We have worldwide Armenian medical institutions that they are gathering together in different countries, trying to help to assist Armenia. We have many Armenians who came to Armenia, and they are serving in Armenia and creating new hospitals and services, healthcare services in Armenia. Thank you.
Time for one last question.
Yes, please.
There have been many problems in the past with Turkey, especially with Kazakhstan and Armenia and many other territories that not owned up.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering, what are your relations with Turkmenistan?
Okay. As for history, as I mentioned, Armenia was divided between two empires, Ottoman Empire and Russian Empire. The survival part of Armenia is Eastern Armenia, Russian Armenia. So we've lost the native population in Eastern Armenia, in Western Armenia, I think, in eastern parts of Turkey. Before the First World War, we had approximately 2.5 million Armenians living in Ottoman Empire. Now we have in Istanbul, mainly in Istanbul, just approximately 60,000-70,000 Armenians. But after the independence, we were trying to establish relations with the neighboring Turkey without any preconditions. I'm not going to say that we have to forget our history, but for the economy of Armenia, we need the border to be open, and we have to live with this country as a neighboring country, and Turkey is very important, is playing very important role in this region. So, but the international recognition of the genocide, and we are calling this genocide, they are not calling it genocide, they are saying that that was a time of war, that's why we deported the Armenian population from the front line to the deserts of Mesopotamia. But during this program of deportation, 1.5 million Armenians died at the time. So that's why the international recognition of genocide is on the agenda of the Armenian foreign policy. But parallelly, we are trying to establish relations with this country without preconditions, and we'll sit around the table and we'll discuss all our problems that we have with them. But the problem is that they are putting preconditions. The first precondition of Turkey is the peaceful settlement of the Nagorno-Karabakh, and the second precondition to stop talking about genocide, because this campaign is humiliating us, humiliating Turks as a nation, etc. But we are saying to them, and we are trying to say to all the people all over the world, that when Germany accepted what the Germans did to Jews, or what Japanese did to Chinese, they have to today respect all these nations, because they did so, not the people, but the governments did. That's why we are not blaming the Turkish people. We are blaming the government of that time, the Young Turk government of the Ottoman Empire. And for us, it's sort of moral compensation if the Turkey will say that, yes, there was a past, there was such events when Armenians died, etc., etc. That's why many countries, and we are very pretty active here, in many countries recognized the genocide of Armenians. Recently, France did it. And the Armenian community here is very influential, is trying to put the issue on the floor of Congress for the recognition. But unfortunately, last year it didn't happen. The Clinton wrote a letter to the Speaker Hastert not to do so, because Turkey is a friendly country to the United States, is allied to the United States, and we are not going to spoil the relationship with Turkey. That is the problem. But many countries did so. They officially recognized by the parliaments, recognized the genocide issue. Thank you.